It began on a night not unlike the one in which his fate had been sealed years ago. The sky hung heavy over Konoha, shrouded in low clouds that whispered of rain. As the boy who had always been alone stood at a quiet crossroads in his young life, Naruto Uzumaki, the vessel of the Nine Tails, the unpredictable child of prophecy, had come to a moment that would never appear in any history book. A fork in the path that only a handful of people would ever understand. He was tired of the looks, the isolation, the weight of a world that had never truly tried to embrace him. It wasn't just that the village saw him as the demon fox. It was that they never tried to see anything else. The turning point came not with fanfare or revelation, but in the quiet voice of someone who understood what it meant to be a weapon rather than a person. It was Itachi Uchiha who found him first, not in an act of aggression, but in quiet observation. The Akatsuki had been watching Naruto for some time, not simply as a target, but as a possible asset. Pain, their enigmatic leader, had begun to wonder if the Nine Tails might be convinced rather than stolen. If Naruto, unlike the others, might see the truth of the world not through the lens of loyalty, but through the lens of loss. Itachi did not approach Naruto with threats. He approached with honesty, or at least his version of it. Beneath the shade of a tree, just outside the village, their conversation unfolded like a slow-burning fire. Naruto had run off after another argument, maybe with Sakura, maybe with one of the elders. And there, Itachi had been waiting. He spoke not of the Akatsuki's mission, nor of war, but of pain, of burdens, of carrying things no one else could understand. And Naruto, though suspicious at first, listened, because for the first time, someone who had seen darkness was offering not punishment, but understanding. In the days that followed, Naruto found himself haunted by the encounter. He didn't tell Kakashi or Jiraiya or anyone. He held it in his chest like a glowing ember, uncertain whether it would ignite a flame or go cold. The village had given him food and shelter, but never peace. The Akatsuki, mysterious and feared as they were, offered a kind of twisted family, built on shared suffering and powerful purpose. And what purpose did Naruto have, really? To chase Sasuke forever? To be a Jinchuriki until he was bled dry in some distant war? Eventually, the offer came. Konan delivered it, silent and graceful, like paper folding into wind. A scroll, sealed and simple, inviting him to the Rain Village, not as a prisoner, but as a guest. Jiraiya was away at the time, and Tsunade, burdened with Hokage duties, never noticed his absence until it was too late. When Naruto left Konoha, it was not with malice in his heart, but with emptiness. He wasn't defecting. He was looking for something the village had never given him. A reason. The journey to Omegakure was gray and damp, fitting the uncertainty that wrapped around him like mist. The city loomed tall and industrial, a maze of pipes and towers, rain falling constantly, as if the sky itself wept for those who lived there. And there, at its heart, pain awaited. Not a man, but a collection of them, bound by tragedy and driven by a vision that most would call madness. But to Naruto, it made a kind of sense. Peace through power. An end to conflict through control. No more friends dying. No more being left behind. Naruto was not welcomed with open arms. Kisame laughed at the idea. Hidan insulted him outright. But pain silenced them with a single look. He saw what others didn't. The flicker of possibility behind Naruto's blue eyes. A vessel of immense power, yes, but also a boy who had tasted loneliness every day of his life. That kind of pain was fertile soil for change. They did not extract the nine tails. Not yet. Instead, they let Naruto speak. They let him walk among them, observe their goals, hear their reasoning. And slowly, the hatred he had been taught to feel toward them began to bend. They were not heroes, but were they truly villains? Was the world, broken and hypocritical as it was, worth serving in its current state? Kurama rumbled in his chest, uncertain and bitter. The fox did not trust these men, nor did he want to be used by them. But even he could sense the shift in Naruto's heart. The boy was not falling into darkness. He was searching through it, reaching out with both hands. It was in his second week among them that he trained with Itachi. The sessions were quiet, methodical, and strange. Itachi didn't teach him jutsu. He taught him restraint, observation, the value of stillness. Naruto, impulsive and brash by nature, found this frustrating. But in time, he understood. There was a kind of strength in patience, in choosing not to strike. By the end of his first month, Naruto had not made a decision. But he hadn't run either. He sat often with Konan, whose calm voice painted images of a world at peace, even if it had to be built from ashes. He avoided Deidara and Hidan. He respected Kakuzu's cold logic. And slowly, the idea that he might never return to Konoha settled into him like a stone sinking to the bottom of a pond. The boy who had once dreamed of becoming Hokage now dreamed of ending all war. Not by leading a village, but by changing the world entirely. Time passed differently within the walls of Omegakure. The constant rain blurred days together into one long, somber reflection. And Naruto, though still young, began to feel the weight of a life lived outside the world he once knew. Each step he took through the damp streets, each conversation he shared with Konan or Itachi, drew him further from the boy who used to crave the attention of a village that never truly saw him. His mind, once so full of fire and dreams, had grown quieter. Not colder, just more focused, more aware of the truths that lay beyond the stories he had been told as a child. Pain spoke often, not always in words. Sometimes it was in the way he stood at the highest tower, staring down at the city that bore his image, unflinching beneath the rain. Other times, it was in the subtle shift of his voice when he spoke of peace, of loss, of the dream to create a world where suffering could be controlled, calculated, ended. Naruto listened. He didn't always agree, but he understood. And understanding, more than anything, was what he had longed for. He trained constantly, not in the reckless, energetic way he used to, but with quiet intensity. Itachi taught him precision. Konan taught him balance. Even Pain himself instructed him at times, not in brute force, but in perspective. Through their eyes, Naruto began to see the shinobi world not as a tapestry of heroes and villains, but as a cycle of endless retaliation. Hatred begetting hatred. War begetting war. He remembered Sasuke's eyes that night in the Valley of the End, burning with pain, not anger. He remembered Gaara's silence, the loneliness they both shared. He remembered his own childhood, full of empty benches and forced smiles. One evening, after a particularly intense session with Itachi, Naruto found himself sitting beneath the steel canopy of the city, listening to the rain tap against the metal. Kurama, usually quiet in recent days, stirred. The fox was not pleased with this new path, but he had grown less combative. He spoke in a deep, tired voice, questioning Naruto's choices, not out of anger, but out of a kind of ancient caution. "Do you really believe these people will bring peace?" he asked. And Naruto, his eyes half-lidded, simply whispered, "I don't know. But I don't think the old way ever worked." That night, Naruto dreamed of Konoha. Not the village as it was, but as it might have been. A place where people smiled at him without suspicion, where Iruka didn't have to defend him, where Sasuke stayed, where his parents lived. He awoke with a strange sense of clarity. He didn't hate the village. He didn't want to see it destroyed. But he also no longer wanted to return to a place that had shaped him through pain and silence. The Akatsuki, in their twisted way, had given him a place. Not a warm one, not a gentle one, but a place where he was listened to, even if only by a few. And in the dark corners of the hideout, far from the others, he began to refine his ideals. He didn't believe in domination. He didn't believe in absolute control. But he did believe the world needed to change. He did believe that the cycle needed to end. And if the Akatsuki were a tool to that end, perhaps he could guide them from within. He began suggesting alternatives during missions. Not killing targets when capture was possible, not destroying when deterrence was enough. Some ignored him. Others began to listen, if only slightly. Kisame scoffed at him still, but even he noticed the change in Pain's tone when Naruto spoke. There was something different about this Jinchuriki, something that unsettled even the most ruthless among them. He wasn't afraid to disagree, and somehow, even Pain respected that. But not all were content with Naruto's growing presence. Hayden, ever bloodthirsty, threatened him openly. Deidara mocked his beliefs, calling him naive and soft. And Toby, still masked, still playing the fool, watched him closely. There was something beneath the surface of Toby's laughter, something cold and ancient that Naruto felt in his bones. He didn't trust that one. Not at all. Then came the moment that tested him. A mission to the outskirts of the Land of Fire, a small border village suspected of harboring spies. Pain sent a team, Kisame, Deidara, and Naruto, to deliver a warning. But Deidara wanted to make an example. He prepared to destroy the village outright, planting explosives throughout the outskirts with his eerie, grinning clay. Naruto intervened, not with words, but by stopping the detonation himself, absorbing the chakra into a new sealing jutsu Itachi had helped him develop. The confrontation that followed was tense, explosive, but ultimately ended with Deidara withdrawing in disgust and Kisame laughing his way back to the rain. Pain summoned Naruto later that night. He was not angry. In fact, he seemed thoughtful. "You wish to shape the Akatsuki in your image," he said. "You want to change us from within." Naruto didn't deny it. Pain nodded slowly. "Perhaps that's exactly why you were meant to be here." The rain continued to fall, as it always had. But that night, it felt different, softer somehow. And Naruto, lying beneath the high ceiling of his chamber, stared upward, eyes wide open, thinking not of what he had left behind, but of what lay ahead. He was still unsure, still walking a path no one had walked before. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't walking it alone. Naruto's presence within the Akatsuki became more than tolerated. It became integral. The organization, once driven solely by a singular vision of domination and pain, began to shift subtly. The change wasn't overt. No dramatic declarations, no uprisings or arguments. It was slower than that. Like moss creeping over stone, barely noticed until one day it covered everything. The others began to see him not just as a Jinchuriki, not even as an ally, but as something more complicated. An anchor that brought with him the quiet weight of conviction. It wasn't that Naruto had become one of them in the traditional sense. His heart never truly darkened, even as he wore the cloak, even as he moved with them through silent forests and blood-stained fields. He still remembered the teachings of Jiraiya, still heard Iruka's voice in the back of his mind, still thought of Kakashi, Sakura, and even Sasuke with a gentle ache that never left him. But he also understood now that his path would not be one of perfect loyalty to any one side. Not Konoha, not the Akatsuki, only to the possibility that there was another way. It was Itachi who noticed first. The boy was changing, not in body, but in soul. Itachi, who had once slaughtered his own clan for a peace he never saw realized, watched Naruto and began to wonder if the path he had chosen so steeped in blood, might not be the only answer. The two spoke often in the shadows of rain-drenched corridors, not always about war or peace or shinobi matters at all. Sometimes they just spoke about what it meant to be human, to care, to grieve, to want something better. In these quiet moments, Naruto felt less like a tool and more like a person again. Konan, too, softened around him. Her voice, once steel, began to sound like folded paper. She taught Naruto how to move without violence, how to create with chakra rather than destroy. He practiced origami alongside her, folding paper into cranes, into foxes, into lilies. Each fold a breath, each crease a memory. They did not talk about missions then. They just listened to the rain and made something that would not hurt anyone. But the world outside was not still. The 5 great nations stirred, rumors spreading of the Akatsuki harboring the Nine Tails. Teams were dispatched, quietly at first, scouts and spies probing the borders of Omegakure, looking for confirmation. It wasn't long before Naruto sensed the first one, a masked ANBU who bore the scent of the hidden leaf. He didn't attack. He merely watched. And Naruto, standing atop the tower beneath Pain's gaze, stared back. They did not speak. But the message was clear. Naruto had not vanished. He had changed. Tensions grew. Pain met with the other Akatsuki leaders more frequently, whispering of greater plans, of an end to this cycle of war through absolute power. He spoke of the tailed beasts, of the weapon they could become. And Naruto, hearing it all, began to question the path he was truly on. Could peace be born from fear? Could pain be the teacher of mankind? The philosophies clashed within him, Pain's vision and Jiraiya's dream. One forged through trauma, the other through hope. A turning point came during a mission in the land of rivers. A rogue shinobi group had taken control of a vital trade hub, and the Akatsuki were sent to deal with it. Naruto led the operation, accompanied by Konan and Kakuzu. The plan was simple: infiltrate, neutralize, withdraw. But when Naruto discovered that the rogue group consisted mostly of war orphans and deserters who had turned to crime to survive, something shifted in him again. He confronted their leader, a boy not much older than himself, whose eyes burned with the same desperation Naruto had once seen in his own. "I don't want to fight you," Naruto said quietly. "But I won't let you keep hurting people." The boy attacked anyway, driven by survival, not hatred. The clash was brief, brutal. But Naruto didn't kill him. He knocked him unconscious, sealed his chakra, and offered the rest of the group a choice: to flee or stay and rebuild under his guidance. Some ran, some stayed. Naruto handed the village over to a neutral clan and left without looking back. Kakuzu grunted. Konan said nothing, but the look in her eyes lingered. Pain summoned Naruto again. This time, the conversation was not about philosophy. It was about reality. "You hesitate," Pain said. "You see weakness in mercy." "I see strength," Naruto replied softly. "Strength in not becoming what we hate." They stared at one another across the cold room, the rain whispering against the windows like a lullaby. Pain did not answer, but he did not argue either. That silence was enough for now. Word of Naruto's actions spread within the Akatsuki. Some respected it. Others resented it. But none could deny that he was changing things, slowly, like a tide, wearing down the jagged cliffs of their ideology. Even the ever-smiling Toby watched him now with more calculation than before, his eyes hidden but sharp. And beneath that mask, an older darkness stirred. For Naruto, the days blurred again. Missions, training, discussions with Itachi and Konan, watching the sunset from the tower that overlooked the endless rain. He dreamed often now, not of battle, but of building, of planting trees where ruins stood, of laughter that didn't come with a cost, of children who didn't grow up alone. The Akatsuki hadn't saved him. Konoha hadn't either. But in the space between both, he had begun to carve out something new. A vision, a hope, a question still unanswered. Could one boy, taught by pain and nurtured by understanding, change the course of the world? And so the rain fell, not as punishment, but as promise. And Naruto stood in its midst, eyes closed, listening for what came next. Naruto continued to move like a shadow between what he once was and what he was becoming. He hadn't turned his back on Konoha in his heart, but his footsteps no longer followed the path that had been carved for him. In the years to come, people would ask whether Naruto Uzumaki had been brainwashed or manipulated. But the truth was more delicate than that. He was simply evolving. The Akatsuki hadn't changed who he was. They'd forced him to look inward and ask what he truly believed. And so, as missions continued and tensions escalated, Naruto found himself once again on the battlefield. This time, it was the land of lightning. The Akatsuki had learned of a facility housing experimental weapons that threatened their goals. It was not a negotiation mission. It was a raid. Deidara joined him this time, along with Hoiden and Kisame. Their presence alone turned the mission into a spectacle of chaos. Buildings crumbled under Deidara's blasts. Screams echoed beneath the sound of crashing walls. And Naruto, in the center of it all, tried to maintain restraint. He moved through the battlefield like a gust of wind, neutralizing rather than killing. He tied down rather than eliminated. He gave people chances to flee. And that hesitation, no, that mercy, angered Haiden. "What are you doing, brat?" he snarled, blood coating his blade. "You're not here to make friends. You're here to make corpses." Naruto didn't answer. He didn't need to. He was no longer the boy who fought for acknowledgement. He had become the man who fought for choice. The mission was technically a success, but it left something behind. A rift, not in the earth, but in the structure of the Akatsuki itself. Hidan grumbled, Deidara muttered, and Kisame merely watched with that shark-toothed grin, amused and calculating. Back in Amegakure, Naruto sat again with Itachi. The elder Uchiha's eyes seemed heavier now. He knew something was coming. Not immediately, but soon. "You're changing things," Itachi murmured. "You may not realize it yet, but the Akatsuki doesn't revolve around its leaders anymore. They orbit around you, uncertain whether you're the storm or the stillness after it." Naruto looked down at his hands. They were calloused, scarred, yet steady. "I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to help people." Itachi exhaled, almost a laugh. "Then you've already done more than most who seek power. But peace is not a straight path." Soon after, word reached Amegakure of a growing alliance among the hidden villages. Kage were speaking behind closed doors, not just about the Akatsuki, but about Naruto specifically. A former leaf shinobi, a jinchuriki, a defector, a potential weapon. That word followed him now like a shadow. Weapon. And it haunted him more than any mission. Pain, sensing the shift in the wind, summoned all active Akatsuki for a council. The room was dim, the air dense with distrust and unsaid fears. "The world prepares to move against us," Pain said, voice low and calm. "We will move first. We will seize the rest of the tailed beasts and force unity." Some nodded. Others hesitated. And Naruto said nothing. After the meeting, Konan found him alone, standing at the edge of the tower where the rain never ceased. "You're pulling away," she said gently. Naruto didn't deny it. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. Every mission feels like it chips away something I can't get back." Konan folded a paper crane in her hand, letting it float away on the wind. Pain believes peace can only be achieved through shared suffering. You believe it comes through understanding. Perhaps both are true, or neither. Naruto turned to her, eyes tired but alive. "Do you think there's another way?" She didn't answer. Not with words, but the way her fingers lingered on his shoulder before she left said enough. She hoped so. She truly did. The next mission took Naruto and Itachi to the land of snow, where whispers of a rogue jinchuriki had surfaced. This one hadn't joined the Akatsuki, nor aligned with any village. He was a wanderer, living in isolation, feared by locals who spoke of a demon lurking beneath the frost. Naruto approached the mission differently. He requested to go alone. He found the jinchuriki, an old man whose back was bent by years, whose eyes still shimmered with raw chakra. They didn't fight. They talked about loneliness, about fear, about what it meant to carry something inside you that the world never wanted. Naruto didn't bring him back in chains. He left him in peace, promising to return one day, not as a member of the Akatsuki, but as someone who understood. This act caused ripples. When Naruto returned, Tobi confronted him, not with threats, but with questions. "You're no longer following orders," he said, voice smooth like silk over poison. "You're following your heart. Hearts don't win wars." Naruto didn't flinch. "Then maybe I'm not here to win a war. Maybe I'm here to end them." Tobi's silence was long, and then a chuckle. "You sound more like Nagato every day." But it wasn't flattery. It was a warning. In the days that followed, Naruto began to prepare for something he couldn't name. Not a betrayal. Not a coup. Just a shift. He began to gather scrolls, to learn sealing techniques beyond what Jiraiya had taught. He met in secret with Itachi and Konan, not to plan rebellion, just to imagine possibility. What if the Akatsuki could be something else? Not a threat, but a force for change. In these hushed moments, Naruto began to believe not in the organization, but in the people he had found within it. Even the broken ones, especially the broken ones. And deep in the silence of Amigakure, he dreamed of a world not dictated by vengeance, but by the choices of those strong enough to walk between extremes. As the rain continued to fall, Naruto's thoughts became clearer. He would not run. He would not betray. He would become something new. A bridge between the warring halves of the world. And somewhere in the distance, for the first time in a long while, he heard thunder, not as a threat, but as a song. It was a quiet tension that spread through the Akatsuki now, like the heavy stillness before a storm. Missions continued. Words were exchanged, orders given. But beneath it all was a growing murmur. Naruto was not like the others. He didn't revel in destruction, didn't hunger for power. Even Kisame, ever the sharp observer behind toothy grins and mocking jabs, had begun to call him the monk behind his back. But there was no mockery in it. It was fascination. Naruto was changing something fundamental within the Akatsuki, even if no one could quite put their finger on what. He still wore the cloak, still carried out assignments, still walked the narrow edge between loyalty and selfhood. But where others brought ruin, Naruto brought clarity. Where others saw villages as tools or obstacles, Naruto saw them as wounded, in need of healing. And most dangerous of all, he inspired conversation. Konan met with him more often now, not as a mentor, not as a superior, but as an equal. They would walk the rain-soaked rooftops of Amigakure in the quiet hours of morning, when the sky was still dark and the lanterns flickered like stars trapped between stone. They spoke of dreams, of what the world might look like without vengeance. Konan confessed her doubts about pain, about their path, about whether their idea of peace had simply become another form of tyranny. Naruto listened. He didn't offer solutions. only his presence, and it was enough. But not everyone was content with the shift. Toby, still the ever-smiling mask behind it all, had begun to appear more frequently. His words were careful, his tone even. But behind every sentence was a question. Are you still ours? Itachi warned Naruto with no words, only glances. Long, steady, unreadable looks that spoke volumes. And Naruto understood. If he were to continue walking this path, he would need to prepare. Not just emotionally, strategically. So he began building connections. Not alliances, not yet, but understandings. During one mission in the Wind Country, he let a sand scout escape. He made sure the scout saw him tend to a wounded civilian instead of harming them. That scout would report back, and perhaps for the first time, the Akatsuki would not be spoken of as monsters, but as something conflicted. In another mission, Naruto went to the land of water with Kakuzu and Sasori. A supposed rebel uprising was forming there, one the Akatsuki was paid handsomely to crush. But Naruto delayed their arrival. He scouted ahead alone, met with the so-called rebels, poor fishermen, and displaced villagers, and offered a solution. A fabricated death, a staged evacuation. When Sasori and Kakuzu arrived, the rebels were gone. The village burned to appear abandoned. The mission was declared complete. The client paid. No one died. But Kakuzu noticed the missing bodies. Sasori noticed the untouched homes. Neither said a word. Yet both were watching. Back in Amegakure, Pain summoned Naruto for a private audience. The god of the Akatsuki sat in his iron chair, eyes like cold planets, unmoving. You are altering the rhythm of this organization, he said, tone quiet, not yet accusatory. Naruto stood, not kneeling, never kneeling. I haven't disobeyed your orders. No, Pain admitted. But you've reshaped them. You've turned missions into negotiations. You've turned targets into survivors. That is not our way. Maybe it should be, Naruto replied. Silence followed. Pain stood. You mistake kindness for strength. That's a luxury children can afford. But peace must be forced. No one chooses it. They must be shown it through pain, through fear. And how long until they only fear us? Naruto asked softly. How long until we become what we hated? The question hung between them like a blade. Konan, standing at Pain's side, said nothing. Her eyes flicked to Naruto only once. Just once. Pain didn't respond. He dismissed Naruto with a wave of his hand. Go. Reflect on your purpose. But Naruto already had. From that day forward, he no longer waited for permission. He began sowing seeds. He wrote letters, encrypted, unsigned, hidden within the folds of villages. Messages not of betrayal, but of hope. Whispers to old friends, to Gaara, to Shikamaru, to those who once knew him. The message was always the same. I'm still me. Watch. Wait. And he knew he was being watched. Zetsu followed him more frequently, not hiding anymore. Just there, in the corner of his eye, a silent reminder that Toby was always listening. It was during this time that Naruto returned to the Land of Fire for the first time since leaving the Leaf. Not as a soldier, not as a spy, but for a mission involving a secret treaty between fire and lightning, one the Akatsuki wanted to sabotage. Naruto volunteered to oversee the infiltration. He crossed the forests like a ghost, recognizing every tree, every hill, the scent of bark, the way dew gathered on leaves in the morning. He passed by the spot where Team 7 once camped for the first time. He lingered there longer than he meant to. But when he reached the edge of Konoha, he didn't enter. Instead, he left a single scroll beneath a stone. It read, "I'm sorry I left. I'm trying to make something better. I still believe in us." He didn't sign it. He didn't need to. From the treetops, Kakashi watched, silent, motionless. He didn't intervene. He just watched. When Naruto returned to Omegakure, something had shifted again. He wasn't afraid anymore. Not of pain. Not of Toby. Not even of the war looming on the horizon. Because now, he wasn't just thinking about saving people. He was thinking about saving the Akatsuki. Not from the world. From itself. The weight of the Akatsuki cloak rested heavier on Naruto's shoulders now. Not because it had become a burden, but because he had filled it with something it was never meant to hold. Purpose. Not destruction, not control, not fear, but the smallest ember of something greater, redemption. And though that ember was fragile, flickering in the wind of the organization's ambitions, it burned just enough to light a path that was his alone to walk. Rumors of Naruto's choices had begun to spread through the shinobi world. Whispers that not all Akatsuki missions ended in slaughter. That in some places the group arrived, spoke, and left peace behind instead of rubble. The stories were inconsistent, sometimes disbelieved, other times exaggerated, but they all carried one common thread: a golden-haired shinobi who spoke like a sage and fought like a storm, but never killed unless he had no choice. Some called him a traitor to the Akatsuki cause. Others called him a ghost from the leaf, haunting the world from beneath a black cloak. The Akatsuki still claimed credit for the chaos, but the name Naruto had taken on a life of its own. Neither enemy nor ally, just something different. Back within the organization's stronghold, Naruto began to work in subtler ways. He spoke more with Itachi now, long after the missions ended, late into the still hours when most had retreated into silence. They didn't always speak of philosophy or war. Sometimes it was family. Sometimes it was dreams. Itachi, ever the enigma, never gave much away, but Naruto noticed that the older shinobi no longer walked with quite the same distance in his gaze. There was a faint tether now, a thread between them, invisible, but real. And in those rare moments of conversation, Naruto began to understand Itachi's pain. Not the pain of a brother or a leaf shinobi, but the pain of someone who had made the hardest choice and then lived in its shadow. The Akatsuki had become a refuge for ghosts like them. And maybe that was why Naruto couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until he'd saved the ones still living like they were already dead. But his vision came at a price. During a mission to the outskirts of the land of Earth, Naruto's careful restraint led to the survival of a high-ranking diplomat that Konan and Kakuzu had expected him to eliminate. The fallout was immediate. The payment was withheld. Pain was furious. Toby, behind his mask, merely watched. It was Toby who called Naruto in this time. "Why are you here?" he asked, voice calm, edged in humor. "Not in the base. I mean, here, with us. You could have run. You could have gone home, but you didn't." Naruto didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the rain dripping from the window. "Because I haven't finished what I started?" Toby tilted his head. "Which is? Changing what the Akatsuki means." There was a pause, a hum, and what if the Akatsuki doesn't want to change? Naruto turned to face him. "Then I'll change it anyway." Toby chuckled. "You sound just like Nagato used to." And with that, he vanished. That night, Naruto knew it was only a matter of time before they tested his resolve. The Akatsuki didn't tolerate rebellion for long. But it wasn't fear that settled in Naruto's chest. It was clarity. He couldn't fight them all. Not yet. But he could prepare. He reached out to Konan again. And this time, he didn't speak in parables or hypotheticals. "Would you follow pain to the end of the world?" he asked her, their silhouettes reflected in the water pooling on Megakura's rooftops. "I already have," she replied quietly. "But if you saw a different path, one with less blood, would you walk it?" Konan didn't answer right away, but she didn't say no. Meanwhile, the other Akatsuki members had grown restless. Deidara viewed Naruto as an artist corrupted, wasting opportunity, wasting power. Sasori found his emotional unpredictability distasteful. Hidan called him soft, and Kakuzu simply marked him as a liability, a bad investment. But it was Kisame who remained curious. More than once, he had fought beside Naruto. And more than once, he'd seen restraint when there could have been carnage. It confused him, intrigued him. And late one evening, Kisame asked him plainly, "What are you trying to prove?" Naruto had smiled. "That we don't have to be monsters." Kisame had laughed, but not cruelly. "That ship sailed long ago, kid." "Maybe," Naruto replied. "But maybe some of us can swim." It was during a large-scale operation in the Land of Lightning that things came to a head. The Akatsuki had planned to intercept and assassinate a team of Kumo shinobi, transporting a critical piece of intelligence, one that could jeopardize their future operations. The plan was simple: intercept, eliminate, vanish. But Naruto didn't follow the plan. Instead, he arrived early, confronted the team, and offered them a choice: surrender the intel, and he would let them live. He wouldn't kill them. He would even ensure they escaped with their lives. At first, they refused, prepared to die. But Naruto's sincerity was disarming, and ultimately, they handed over the scroll and vanished into the mist. Naruto thought he had succeeded, but pain arrived anyway. He hadn't come for backup. He had come for Naruto. Rain fell softly in the distance, pattering against the broken stones of a forgotten temple where Pain had chosen to confront Naruto. The air held no hatred, only a silence so deep it seemed to absorb the weight of every unspoken word. Naruto stood alone beneath the high, cracked archway, the edges of his Akatsuki cloak soaked and heavy, but his gaze steady as Nagato's eyes bore into his soul. Pain's 6 paths stood around him, silent specters of his will. Konan stood to the side, wings not yet unfolded, her expression unreadable. The Rinnegan, swirling and vast, regarded Naruto not as a traitor, but as a challenge. This was not punishment. This was a judgment. "You've strayed too far," Pain said, voice echoing from multiple mouths, each word carried with the weight of a god. Naruto didn't flinch. "You said you wanted peace. So do I. But what we're doing now isn't peace. It's fear." "You do not understand true peace," Pain replied. "Not yet. Peace is born through pain, through loss. You have not suffered enough." Naruto's fingers curled slowly. "I've suffered plenty, but I don't want anyone else to." The air tensed. It was not an argument anymore. It was a final chance, an invisible line neither was willing to cross until now. "You will either return to our path," Pain said, "or fall beneath it." And then the storm broke. The fight that followed was not chaos. It was poetry, carved in fury. Naruto met the 6 paths head-on, moving like a shadow made of fire, Rasengan in hand, not with hatred, but with purpose. Each path pushed him to his limits. The animal path summoned creatures that tore the temple apart. The Asura path launched missiles from its arms. The Deva path remained still, waiting, watching. Naruto dodged, struck, deflected, never killing, only disabling. He moved with precision, born not of rage, but conviction. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to be understood. Konan, standing in the shadows, felt something crack inside her. A memory of another boy, one with yellow hair and a dream too big for the world. Yahiko. And that's when it happened. The moment Naruto finally reached Nagato, behind the veil of pain, sitting emaciated in the heart of the mechanical tower that powered his will. Naruto found him not as a god, but as a man clinging to a dream, twisted by grief. Naruto didn't fight him. He spoke. "You don't have to do this anymore," he said. You've already changed the world, just not in the way you wanted." Nagato's eyes trembled. "Do you think you can fix it?" Naruto knelt in front of him. "No, but I think we can." And for a long moment, nothing moved. Then pain crumbled. The 6 paths collapsed like puppets whose strings had been cut, one by one, falling into the silence they had once enforced. Konan stepped forward, wings unfurled, not to fight, but to shield Nagato with her presence. There was no need. Naruto simply stood, breathing hard, eyes not victorious, but mournful. The Akatsuki did not fall that day, but it changed. Word spread quickly, first as whispers, then as roars. The group began to splinter. Some stayed loyal to Pain's ideology. Others left quietly, unsure of what Naruto's actions meant. But in the center, a new circle formed, not a new Akatsuki. Not exactly, but something smaller, quieter. A gathering of those who wanted to believe that peace could be built, not forced. Naruto, Konan, and Nagato remained in the Rain Village for a time, working in secret, rebuilding what had been torn. Not just buildings, but trust. Children who had once feared the red clouds now watched as food returned to their streets, as flowers grew again in the gutters. Sasuke, far away, heard the stories of Naruto, the traitor, the savior, the anomaly, and something inside him stirred. Not anger, not confusion, but curiosity. Perhaps, somewhere on the horizon, their paths would cross again, not as enemies, but as mirrors trying to understand themselves. Kakashi, hearing of Naruto's transformation, would sit on the roof of the Hokage building in silence, wondering if there was still time to pull that boy home. And Jiraiya, had he lived, would have smiled. In time, Naruto's name took on new meaning, not as a symbol of destruction or rebellion, but of quiet resistance, of peace pursued not through war, but through will. He remained in the shadows, still wearing the cloak, not to honor the Akatsuki, but to remind himself what he had overcome. That even in the darkest of places, a flicker of light could endure if one dared to protect it. And so, in the gentle lull of rain that whispered across the rooftops of Omegakura, Naruto Uzumaki became something new. Not a hero, not a villain, but a bridge between what had been and what could still be. And in that stillness, as the world turned slowly onward, he finally found rest. A peace not born of pain, but of persistence.